I'm going to be doing a physics degree today, resume. A little different than my usual engineering, but still welcome. And if you guys want to get your resume looked at, please let the mods know, and we can set that up. But yeah, again, we want to make this a discussion. So if you guys have questions, please stop me and ask them. And we can kind of, talk it out and see what viewpoint makes the most sense, for this particular case. And I like to do a disclaimer beginning of these just to let everybody know that this is kind of focused to US and Canadian resumes. I know that a lot of different countries kind of have different standards, but the way I edit resumes is, usually to the US and Canadian way. All right. You guys have any questions, or do you want to get started? Am I going to be talking to myself today?
Perhaps.
I'll talk. It's my resume too, by the way, for everyone. So. And feel free to tear it apart if you want. I won't take it personally. I just want to have an optimal resume, so it's okay.
Okay, so it's actually, I think you're the first person who's actually been here while we've talked about the resume. I think the other couple of resumes that we've done, the person hasn't actually been online, so that's it's really nice actually, because I get to ask you questions and make sure I understand what's happening. But
on that note, Emily,
yeah.
Real quick, Frost has asked what position is this person applying to. So Grayson, if you wouldn't mind sharing that, I think having that context, what kind of positions you're looking to apply to.
Yeah, that's a good point. So this is kind of a general resume, I would say, but my sort of interest / specialization is more with semiconductor industries or related industries. So a lot of the stuff I'm applying to is like research engineer, test engineer, process engineer, and then anything within the semiconductor industry. So anything from manufacturing technician at Intel. I live near an Intel facility, to something related to solid state physics or materials engineering. I know it's kind of non-specific, but
all right, non-specific is fine. All right. Are we ready to get going? All right.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so first off, when we look at this resume, what do we think about the general layout, kind of first impressions? I'm going to say it right off the bat. I don't love the mix of serif and sans serif fonts, but that might just be personal preference. I think it is clear to see which sections, begin and start where. I think you did a good job of basically breaking it up so that it, is easy to see. Does anybody else have any sort of items? Yeah.
I was there last week when you mentioned. You said let's look at a boring resume. So I guess a comment would be I would classify this under a boring resume.
So
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but in terms of initial impressions, it's a very resume-y looking resume.
I apologize for using that word. That was specifically to distinguish a overly busy resume from a not busy resume. I wasn't intending to make that a negative at all. I think that this is a great layout and a great format. I'm sorry. I think Frost was beating himself up too. He was like, my resume looks boring. I didn't know.
I've never been a fan of putting GPA on the education. I'm a little bit further along in my career, though, so that might just be where I'm at. I would actually move this summer school into experience, and then if you can remove some of the lines on the description of your degree, you have more room to sort of flesh out your experience with programming.
I'm sorry, is this Jade?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I get the voices and make sure I know like what's going on.
I've been watching the YouTube ones. This is my first time being in the live, so I apologize if I make any protocol errors.
No worry. Welcome.
If I could, just as a response to that, because I think that those are good points. So for the computational physics summer school, it was under my experiences before, but I was actually recommended to put it in education, and it's sort of it was an experience that sort of sounds more valuable than it was, I think. I got exposure to a bunch of different software and different computational techniques, but I wouldn't say it was like, I didn't really learn anything super substantive. It was all very, very surface level. And then in regards to the description of the education, I guess part of, I see what you mean with the GPA. I guess it's just because it's like higher. I was like, I'll throw it on there because I guess it would look good if it was better. And then for the coursework, part of that might be, I took like 10 extra senior level classes during my degree, and I just wanted to like kind of put something out there to show them that I went super hard with my coursework. I don't know how much they value that, though.
All right, I'm going to add my take on this as well, just to kind of put it in the mix. Having GPA on your resume, especially when it's above a 3.5, is very typical because engineering is hard, right? So I think any GPA above a 3.5, even like a 3.2, you should put it on. I don't think it's hurting you at all. Maybe it's taking up a tiny bit of space, but it doesn't have an extra line going for it. In terms of the relevant coursework, I usually suggest people to remove any required courses for their major. But I think in your case, because you are applying to like engineering positions that are very specific in the semiconductor industry, I think that will try to help bridge the gap. Like, yes, you don't have an engineering degree, but hey, you took these relevant courses. So
yeah.
like
the
that's
only
kind
required courses. Sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The only required courses were the experimental physics ones.
Okay, so I think you could probably take those off if you wanted to. I mean, obviously you're a physics major, so you'll probably take like general physics courses. But the ones that are more related to the semiconductor industry, I would definitely leave on. And I think if you did take off experimental physics courses, you wouldn't like gain any room on the page. Like that's not going to bring you down to one line for your coursework, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think it really hurts you, other than maybe being a little bit busier than you would otherwise. But again, I don't think that I don't think it's gonna like make or break anything, in my opinion. I personally like to see education at the top if you've just graduated. I know that a lot of people may disagree with that.
I disagree.
It's good to know that you're a fresh grad, and that's kind of like your most recent thing. Again, I don't know. I'm kind of back and forth on that because you are going for like kind of a different industry than maybe like your major kind of indicates. So I don't know. I think you'd have to weigh that and figure it out yourself. I didn't say this earlier. Sorry. Let me just say this real quick. I didn't say this earlier, but please know that everything I'm saying is just a recommendation. And you, at the end of the day, you have the kind of the responsibility to figure out what you think makes sense to you, and then go forward with whatever you think is best. I'm not here to say do this, do that, or anything like that. I'm just kind of here to make suggestions.
I'm not sure if it's. Sorry.
I guess my thought process for the education below the relevant experience is sort of tied to the fact that a bachelor's degree in physics is generally considered less marketable than an engineering degree. So I wanted them to look at look at the stuff I've done. So then they're like, oh yeah, this guy can do what we need him to do. He did study physics, but I mean, look, he did all this stuff. You know what I mean? I don't know if there's any merit to that, but that was kind of my thought process, the flow in which they'll read the resume.
I agree with that. I think that's kind of what I hinted at earlier.
Yeah, I think with the experience being on top, given what Grayson just said, this kind of plays into your general advice of putting the most relevant stuff up first. I've not seen education come below relevant experience. I don't think I have. So it looks a little strange to me, but in terms of getting what's important in front of a hiring manager's face first, I think this could be a really good move, actually. And then, Jay, did you still want to say something?
Yes. The research intern, the middle experience, is this a typo that you're currently still a research engineer? Otherwise, I would say to move that to the top since you are still actively doing that.
Okay. Yeah, that's not a typo. Thank you.
I might disagree. I think I personally prefer ordering things by relevancy, not necessarily by what you're doing, the most recent. So if his R&D materials engineering intern position is stronger and more relevant to, the semiconductor industry that he wants to go into, then I would actually say lead with that. And keep the research intern second. They can see when you're doing things by the dates on the right. But in general, the higher something is on your resume, the more likely they'll read it in general. And that goes with bullet points. People almost, when you skim read, you usually either read the first item in every section or the first bullet point in every item. So that's why I suggest to put most relevant stuff first. I know it's kind of iffy with chronological ordering, but that's kind of my personal take on it. But yeah.
Yeah, that's I think that's kind of what I was thinking, because the materials engineering is the only industry experience that I have. And if I were to actually order this in terms of what would be most valuable for the industry I'm actually trying to work in, the one I'm doing currently would be put last as opposed to first. But I think there's both of those explanations make sense. So.
Yeah, gonna have to think hard about it and then make a decision.
Yeah, I saw unemployed for a year.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. I guess if you're used to seeing things in chronological order, I could see how. Well, I mean, they weren't unemployed because they just graduated, so they would have just been, a student.
Yes.
I see what you mean.
Yeah. I think as you move down the page, I think it becomes more apparent. But
I guess we should look at this through the lens of a jaded, stressed hiring person, right? They're like, you get half a second,
Yeah, I personally think content comes first and then timeline comes second. So I think people first look at what you've done before they actually look at when you've done it. That's might be totally a different take than some people, but that's kind of how I expect people to read resumes. But there might be people, like if Jade was your the hiring manager, then maybe he does think that you've been unemployed for a year or whatever. But again, I think the ordering kind of emphasizes what you've, like, your strongest item. Again. All right, do we want to like dive into the bullet points, or do we have any more like general things people notice?
For the sake of beating the discussion to death.
Yeah, sure.
I want to ask if there's a distinction for both you, Emily, and for Jade, in like why you have your opinions that you do for the ordering of experience, which seems to be kind of contradictory to your ordering of experience versus education. Because if I heard it correctly, for example, Emily, you still kind of have the personal opinion of having education above relevant experience. Presumably because it's typical, maybe because it's chronological, but within experience, you prefer to see things in order. And it sounds like Jade has it the other way around.
I actually think that the way he has it works, just because his degree isn't as relevant as his engineering internship. But anybody else who is an engineer that has an engineering degree, I would say put that you like just graduated as like a fresh grad or has yet to graduate. I think that usually is put first, and then as you gain experience with a full-time job after graduation, then the education section moves down, because then your education isn't as important as the things you've learned after you've graduated. But again, I think this works here just because of there's special circumstances sort of thing.
Okay. And then Jade, did you want to add anything? Because I think you were in agreement that education should be below relevant experience, but it sounds like you want the experience itself to be in chronological order.
So chronological. So I've never hired anybody. I'm not a hiring guy. I just have an interest in resumes. And I guess coming from a military background, everything is very sequential. And so to change things from that sequential order just doesn't occur to me. As far as education, I've found that oftentimes it's just a check mark. And so they will, go down and say, oh, yes, BS, we're good. But to put it at the top, you're saying that the most important, best thing that you were bringing to the table is that you graduated college, which I don't think is the message that you should be trying to send.
That's an interesting take. I like it because that's not what I would normally think. But I think I've explained my method. I think if I explained it again, I would be saying the same thing. So I think we're just at a different viewpoints, and that's totally fine. I'm glad that, like, usually we have Laz here, like, disagreeing with everything I say. So I'm glad that we have somebody else to keep me in check and keep me guessing.
Yeah, I think the variety of viewpoints has been one of the more interesting points about these discussions. So thank you, Jade, for explaining in greater detail and for speaking up in the first place. And if we're good to move on from the discussion now, Emily, you had asked if anything else stood out. I get that the Education State University, the first one there, I presume June 2021 is you graduating. I don't know that I've really noticed many people who leave off like a beginning date. I don't think it really matters, but it stand out.
I actually recommend to just put the end date. I personally don't think it matters if it took you 10 years or if it took you 4 years. You have the degree, and that's when you got it. I think, the end date is really most important. And if you did take extra time, I wouldn't want that to count against you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's the other, just for me specifically at least, I went to community college first and transferred in as well. So then it would be like, it would look like 3 years that I got my degree, and then they'd be like, oh man, did this guy just get, damn, he got his degree in 3 years, and then, you know, it seems more potentially convoluted, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think hearing that, I think you made the right call here, in my opinion.
Did you get an associate's from that community college?
I did.
Yeah, I would usually recommend you include it.
Oh, really?
I usually recommend including every single degree you have. However, if there's something that's more relevant, you still want to fit on the page, basically. You still want to fit to one page.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if that takes up room that maybe would better be used to, you know, describe your internship or describe your, you know, something else more relevant, then I'd say go with that.
I think for all the main relevant experiences, I think I've sort of exhausted the bullet point count, except maybe on the middle one.
Okay.
Whereas, if anything, I mean, because I was thinking that people sort of just didn't care about associate's degrees. If you have the bachelor's, it's basically just this. It's just the same, but way more specified and with more relevant sort of experience. So it almost seemed redundant to put it on. But do you think it's more important to have that than the one publication that I'm the second author on, or something?
No, I think you'd have to weigh that. I mean, obviously you did weigh it and didn't include the associates.
Yeah.
But I don't know. What do you think, Jade?
So for my education, I actually currently have 2 bachelors and 2 associates. And so what I did is I have everything on a single line. So if you take that BS applied physics and put it up behind State University, you now have a 1-line education bullet. And I would take out the additional classes that you have there, and then you can put your AS or AA or whatever it is below that. And now you are taking up, you know, only 2 lines, and you are showing off both degrees.
Okay, so you're saying you take this bit and kind of put it here?
So I have the name of my school and the name of the degree, and then on the right side I have the year graduated.
Okay,
So,
I know what you're saying. Yeah. And then I honestly think you could leave the relevant coursework if you wanted and add the associates kind of here, because he'll get an extra line from that state, moving the state university down one onto the same line as the BS. And then he could put, I don't want to say ass, associates. Sorry. I forgot that this was recorded. Yeah, and then he can still have the like line of space between the two to kind of separate them if he wants to continue keeping the summer school there.
I guess I should ask, like, what is the value in them knowing you have an associate's and a bachelor's? If it's just an associate of science and then a bachelor of science.
It depends on where you're applying. Some places, degrees, just having them is really important. Like I am adjacent to the government, and just having them puts me slightly higher than people who only have, one or 2. And, some places are all about, have to have a degree, have to have a specific degree, and being able to stack up degrees, you show you're more educated. Other places, they don't care. But if you can fit it in, you get bonus points for the people who do care. And if they don't care, then they don't care anyway.
Yeah, I think that since you're not like using space that could be otherwise used for like other things, like since it's basically if you do what Jade is suggesting and just throw the state university in front of the BS, you kind of get a free line. And I think throwing the associates down won't hurt you.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And I actually usually say put the date at which you received the degree on the same line as the degree itself, not as the university. Anyways, so like it kind of, I don't know, it makes sense to me. I think that that's a great suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Do we want to get into bullet points?
Well, I had one more comment on degrees.
Go ahead.
3.8 is pretty high. Were you cum laude or cum something?
Yeah, I was 0.02 away from summa cum laude or whatever that pronunciation is. So I got magna cum laude.
Yeah. So for me, instead of putting GPA, I would put that. It looks cooler, and I don't like GPAs. But I would say put cum laude on there.
I 100% disagree. I think that saying the cum laude or whatever you've earned, and not putting the GPA would make me kind of question. Like I would expect if that you have an impressive GPA, you include it. And I think 3.88 is an impressive GPA. I know. I'd like to know why you don't like GPAs. But I think that especially with some like positions having minimum GPAs, I think it's kind of important that you show that, hey, I am above the minimum GPA for this position that you want. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times that's no requirement on the job. Like we actually are only going to be looking for, 3.2 and above or whatever. So I think leaving it off would actually hurt you, in my opinion.
I personally, sorry, go ahead, Jay.
I was just going to say, in all seriousness, my GPAs aren't really that good. So that's why I don't like advertising them. But
Yay.
yeah, that's just I have an aversion.
I definitely think that there's not very strong, or if any, correlation between GPA and people's competence as engineers. But in terms of marketability, it seems like a useful thing to try to leverage, right? Some people still have the weird notion that higher number equals better.
Yeah, I don't know if
I agree that grades are not that big of a deal.
I don't know if you watched the other resume edits, but I actually sort of said something that kind of made me shove my foot in my mouth earlier. I said that higher GPAs, like having a 4.0, kind of makes me suspicious because it's so high. I'm usually thinking like, oh, is this person just really book smart? Did they actually work with their hands well? Or did they just, study really, really hard and then know all of the formulas and everything? But upon reflection, that probably wasn't the best thing to say because I think I offended a lot of people. But I think having a really high GPA and then also having a relevant experience kind of proves me wrong. It's like, I can have a high GPA and still do really relevant, hands-on work or, internships or projects or whatever. But that's I kind of regret saying that earlier, but
I've heard that before. It kind of makes some amount of intuitive sense that the higher your GPA, then theoretically the longer you spend studying, which then it's not a huge leap to think that would mean you had less time to work on your projects or something. But yeah, I don't know. I'm probably going to keep the GPA on. But,
yeah, what I'm saying is that I think because you have both a high GPA and strong internships and stuff like that, then that doesn't apply to you at all. That's more of like people with high GPAs and then like no internship experience or no project experience or something like that. Then it's a little bit more difficult to see how the person would translate to like a working job that's not in academia. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I think part of me too, since I just graduated, I'm like holding on to like like I just feel proud for having done it. Like, and that's why I have the relevant coursework as well, I think. I mean, because it just seems like I didn't take the minimum number of classes, right? Like I went fucking hard at this thing. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse for the YouTube video, but like I literally just dedicated my entire life to doing this whole thing, you know. I took like 10 extra classes. You know? It's like, damn, man. I want them to see that shit, you know?
Yeah.
But maybe they don't care. I don't know.
Well, you care, and that's, I think, what's important. So do we want to dive into now, kind of reading the bullet points one by one? Is that acceptable?
We will. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that Frost gets his comments acknowledged. And
sorry, I'm not reading them.
I know that. That's why I want to make sure that they get read out loud, both for you and for anyone who's watching the video later. But most recently, Frost says that they agree with Jade in terms of the GPA. Despite Latin honors not being standardized across all universities, it seems a tad better that you were actually awarded with something.
I don't necessarily agree, because awards are kind of a difficult thing for me to kind of wrap my head around, because when the standards for those awards are different, it's hard to know how much they actually mean. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and specifically, I think a good example would be my university versus like, if you consider a more prestigious university that has a lot more students in a physics department, and they actually award a finite number of Latin honors, whereas at my university, it just has to do with your GPA range. Like if I'm between 3.8 and 3.9, then I get magna cum laude. But yeah, that's sort of, you know, I'm probably gonna just keep the GPA on, just because it seems the easiest. Like there's no ambiguity with it, and because even the difference between them seems mildly trivial to me anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a little more specific when you actually write down the 388. And I get that same thing when people write down like Dean's List. Like, oh, I was on Dean's List for, you know, X number of semesters. They're like, yeah, you have a 4.0. Of course you were on Dean's List. Like, it's kind of redundant. But yeah, I think, honestly, I think in your position, that's kind of what I do. But did Frost have any other comments?
Yes. They said earlier, beginning date can actually go against you. Some hiring managers have strong bias against students who take way too much time finishing their degrees. So I think that was kind of an agreement with most people here.
Yeah.
And then before that, if applying to industry, then I agree about the relevancy / priority / impact. If going to the academic, into research, I think that's what that means to say, then that's the time it really is preferred to be in chronological order. So again, going back to relevance versus chronology. And
all
I
right.
think Frost might actually have more experience in dealing with graduate degrees than
He does. I read over his resume like on Wednesday or Thursday, and we kind of did a really intense look at it. So he's kind of more experience on the academia side of things, which was actually really interesting because I don't have experience in that at all. So it's kind of cool to like look at it together. But we have spent 30 minutes just looking at general stuff. So I kind of want to get into the details, if that's cool with everyone.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, cool. One last thing on formatting, I would just make the long dashes or short dashes all the same. That's something that people don't usually notice, but I am sort of, I guess I do this all day long. Not really all day long. This is not my full-time job. I do this a lot, so I pick on little details. But let's get in on this. Do you want to just go top down? Start at this internship? All right. Okay, so I don't know. I guess I should do this a little bit at the beginning. I personally like the STAR method or Google XYZ method to writing resumes. I think it helps pull out your details a lot. So when I look at your bullet points, that's what's going to be in my mind. Do you have a situation, task, action, and result? Or, did X as measured by Y resulting in Z? So that's usually what I'm looking for. So let's see what you got. Designed to successfully execute a complement. Can you guys read this? Is this visible?
I'm fine. I have one in front of me, but for other people.
Yeah, can you guys read this? Is this high enough quality?
I've got a big monitor. I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got I think, somewhat average size monitor, and I can read it just fine.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Okay. Designing successfully executed complex experiments, resulting in multiple product features that meet established performance and operation criteria for thermionic diode power display. I don't know what that means, but that's okay. So what did you do? You ran experiments. Why did you run the experiments? To look at the power density? Why did you run the experiments?
It was to improve the performance of a thermionic diode. So the company, it's like a very niche thing, but basically a thermionic diode is you have a cathode and anode, and you heat the cathode and then induce thermionic emission of electrons from the surface and then collect the current. And so the research and experiments that I did had to do with doing things in a vacuum chamber that improved the amount of current, or just the power density generally, that could be extracted from this thermionic diode.
Okay, and the product features are your variables that you're messing with?
Yeah, basically the experiments that I did fed directly into another set of experiments that were done, and then those experiments related to the constraints that we had to apply to the final product, because this company didn't have its final product created yet. It's in a research phase.
Okay.
So a lot of the experiments I did, the results indicated a lot of different things that were this is a new constraint on what the final product can be. This is a new constraint, etc. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Although from the bullet point, I don't really get what you're specifically testing for. I mean, I guess you're saying you're looking at
another one of the issues when I was thinking about this was that I signed an NDA, so there's I can't really talk about super specific stuff without revealing a lot of the actual IP.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm used to NDAs.
I got helped with this by I think their name is Chun Snow or something in the Discord.
Yeah.
They helped me come up with some of these lines, because I think before it was very passive voice or something.
Okay. Yeah. But, you basically just want to say what you did, how you did it, and then what the results were. And NDAs are tricky because you can't say exactly what you did sometimes, or exactly. So I think that. What do you guys think? Do you think this is too general, or do you think this is specific enough to communicate what what, I don't want to call you OP, what Grayson actually did.
Maybe this doesn't directly answer your question, but I know last week when I glanced over it, I felt that a lot of these bullet points seem to be very good at describing what it was that you did without really explaining what the results were. And I know that's something that Emily frequently likes to see is the results of what you've done.
Yeah, it says here that like that Grayson was able to like evaluate the basically product features to see. In my mind, I see like they had like a criteria in front of them, and then they did the test, and did this product feature pass or fail this specific criteria for the diode density or the diode power density. Is that an accurate interpretation of what you're trying to say?
Yeah, for the most part, I think. Basically, it was like I'd meet in a room with my main team. We would talk about the results of an experiment and what the implications were. We'd come up with different hypotheses and then design experiments, find out more information, iterate, and then the next week, rinse and repeat, basically. So there was a large diversity in the kinds of experiments. Some of them were to impose standards on like operating procedures, and then other ones were actually trying to like a new method to improve some process or something. So it was a mixture of both operational, like establishing parameters of operation, and like just novel stuff.
So I would, reading this, I think that splitting those to like parameters versus like new sort of trying to explore, I guess, more. I think those two could probably be split. And by splitting them, you'd be more, I think you'd be a little more successful in describing what exactly, like the experience that you're doing without, specifically saying what you were doing or like violating an NDA. So I would actually split those types of experiments if I were you, especially talking to you about it, which is nice because usually I don't get to talk to the person. And
so like one section for optimization and another for like novel research or something like that.
I wouldn't say sections, just specific bullet points, because I would split those into two separate tasks because they're having two results that are very different. Like one you're trying to like validate something and one you're trying to like explore something. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Okay. Yes. That makes sense.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the 4 bullet point limit thing? Is that just...
I say take as many bullet points as you need to properly explain what you've done. I think that as we go down, we might take some out or shuffle them around. But I personally don't believe in a hard number of minimum or maximum.
Okay.
The advice that I've heard, and I don't remember if this is specific to resumes or just in general, but is to have 3 to 5 bullet points. So
that's
obviously
probably like a goal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think there's a hard limit. I agree with Emily on that.
And then so I'm going to say split between innovation and like test 2 criteria. Because I think as we go down, we might remove some. So again, I don't know if you've watched the resume things, but a common thread is basically like, what I tell people is list everything out that you've done and then like take out the less relevant stuff to fit it onto one page. So, if you add this second bullet point, maybe you take a less relevant bullet point somewhere else out to make it fit on one page or, something like that. But we're still just on number 1. So let's anybody else have any comments on this first bullet point? All right. Okay, complex electronic systems. Ooh. So again, with the STAR method, we want to start with a verb and kind of each sort of bullet point is going to be a task of something that you did. Again, you probably worked with the other person on the Reddit, but this is passive voice. So we would want to start with a verb. So like you'd start with interface, complex systems through GPID stack. Basically, it's a lot easier if every bullet point is formatted exactly the same to read them really fast. Like, oh, what did they do? They designed this. They, interface this. And because they're going to be looking at it for like, not a very long time, you want to make sure it's super easy to read. All right.
Okay.
Verb. Okay. What did you do? You ran Python scripts on Linux, altered the code, adjusted the code based on each experiment, and troubleshot any connections or network issues. Okay, so this is relating to the experiments in bullet point 1?
Yeah.
Okay.
So my main thing was I was responsible for 2 vacuum systems.
Okay.
Ultra high vacuum systems. And so each one has, there's all sorts of different attachments that have that already had internal Python scripts written for it. So there wasn't like a ton of script writing. It was just altering basic stuff for the most part. And the network issues were just, as it sounds.
Okay.
I think that line was mostly just so I could say Python and Linux because those just sound attractive.
Okay. But if someone asked you like a Python or a Linux like code question, you'd probably have trouble with it, right?
Yeah, I'd do horribly.
Okay.
I'm doing stuff now like independently to get better at coding, but yeah, no. Like if they asked me some kind of leak code question, I would fail.
Okay, so I think that kind of even strengthens my argument to split the first one into 2 bullet points, because we're on the second bullet point and you're already saying, hey, I'm not that confident with this. So I think that by splitting the first bullet point into 2 strong bullet points, we kind of get more out of it. And then again, I always say, put the most relevant, the strongest, the most impressive stuff at the top. What do you guys think about this? I don't love that it's 3 separate sentences, sort of. I like to kind of put everything together nicely in a nice little like neat package for the reader. And that can be done by just kind of shuffling words and seeing how, commas sound or whatever. What do you guys think? What do you, the other viewers on the line, what do you guys think?
I want to read out Frost's question here. My only question would be, what is the quantitative equivalent of successfully? Like after the experiment, is its efficiency at 98% or something like that?
Yes, the result, the ever strong result. Was that Frost's comment or was that your own comment?
That was me quoting Frost.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I'm guessing you don't have a way to quantify that right now, do you, Grayson?
Sorry, I think successfully executed. Yeah, that's a fair point, actually. I mean, I would say there isn't really a hard quantitative definition. It's the experiment gives you the information it gives you. It's not really like. Does that make sense? Like I wouldn't.
Yes.
I would hesitate to say that there's a hard quantitative definition of success in this context.
Yes, I agree that sometimes it can be hard for tasks to be quantitative, but I think a good way of thinking about it is like, say if you did like a really crappy job and like, or you forgot to alter the code totally. I'm guessing the experiment wouldn't work, right? Because you're
I guess when I said successfully, I meant like things were done as planned initially, and the results were the data was collected. Right, the data we intended to collect was collected.
But the successfully is not in this bullet point. I don't know that you did this bullet point successfully.
Right, that's above on the first one. I assume Frost is referring to.
But I also don't know that you like interface the, I guess, what did you say? The like vacuum chambers properly, because you don't say you did that successfully. You say that because they're like related tasks. I understand that you're trying to say that they were done successfully, and therefore, in order to do them successfully, I had to, write this Python correctly and get them interfacing properly. But I would almost be redundant and put like another result in, like, kind of communicating that, like, like, you did this stuff, but how do I know, like, you did a good job? Like, I guess you said you troubleshot the connection or network issues, but like at the end of the day, you got it to work.
I would say that troubleshooting network and connection issues feels out of place in this bullet. To me, it feels like that's basic experimental design stuff. Of course, you're going to troubleshoot your experiment until it works.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's true.
That's fair. I was gonna make the comment something similar of just cutting out the line after Linux, basically. Like the rest of it is again sort of redundant, but then it also gives the impression that I was like writing, like from scratch different Python scripts. But that's
so
not,
you could just say like altered and adjusted here.
It might be the line. Should I just take it out if I'm splitting the other point into two, and I need room? Like, would that be a one to remove? Or I guess when I put it in there originally, I was told that it looks good to have experience, interfacing different instruments, and then running code on them.
No, if you did it, then keep it in there.
Okay.
Like that's kind of I think if you just say and altered and adjusted or adjusted Python scripts, I think that combines the two. Or you could even say you can even leave the based on each experiment at the end if you really wanted to. Oh my God, where's my thing? But I think that kind of communicates it a little bit better and then you don't have to use and then I would say take out the second bullet point, but like combine these two like sentences sort of. Does it sound better to you if we do it that way? Like interface through stack connectors and altered and adjusted Python scripts on Linux based on each experiment. That sounds good. That sounds better to me, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's fine. I feel indifferent. If that sounds better to you, then to me they both sound like basically equivalent. But I had it in passive voice before anyway, so.
Yeah, well, I hope you change that because passive voice is no good. Sorry.
You're not gonna like the next one.
Yes.
Actually, yeah.
Yes. So you use these things, a lot of things. To use in
I guess that's a facet of it being a general. Like I said in the beginning, it was sort of a general resume, and I kind of just chucked everything I've used in a very general way, just so that if someone's looking at the resume and they're like, well, is this guy gonna like not know how to like do a swage lock or something? Look, you did all this different stuff,
So this sounds to me more like a skills bullet point.
Not in my current resume, but in previous resumes, I've actually had a skills and a tools section. And so, you can grab all of those things. And
they have a technical, oh my goodness. Oh, don't bark.
You know, it's actually it's a fair point because even right now under my technical skills section, there's a lot of like just general statements as opposed to actual skills. So it
Yeah.
might be good to remove that and then put any of the like main important skills into that section.
Yeah. So when I read bullet points, I want to see something that you've done, why you did it, and the result. And this is just like, I used this, period. I don't know if you used it well. I don't know if you were successful when you used it. You could have done a terrible job at what you were doing, and I wouldn't know. Usually for like specific items that you've worked with, that again, I think that would make sense to go more in like a skills technical section like you have listed below.
One is where you're sourcing everything, but it sounds like you developed a process to define requirements with manufacturing houses.
I wouldn't go that far. It's like it's just such a rare product, and it involves alkali metal chemistry. So it's just like it's not something people really produce a lot. Oh, I see. I see. Do you mean the when you say you developed a process? Do you mean because I got that refund because they didn't meet the criteria or something like that?
Well, so what your vendor outreach project, you're describing it in sort of two different ways. So vendor outreach project 1 is you were just calling around and getting these synthesized, which you already said in the first half. But if you were able to quantify that, especially if you made something that was repeatable, that this company is still using based on what you've done, then you've developed something that they are now still using your process of how you talk to that vendor and said, this is what I need you to do. These are the steps I need you to take. I have no idea what you were doing or how it's done. But if you wrote that all out and then you're giving that to vendors and said, hey, I need you to do this way, and they're still doing that today, then you created something, and that's valuable.
I see. Yeah, I would have liked to have been able to say that, but unfortunately not. It's sort of someone say something. Sorry.
So you at the end of the day, you didn't end up buying anything, right? Because you said it was too expensive.
We bought from one person, but the condition was that we would send it to a lab and do XPS characterization. And if it proved to be impure, then we were going to get a refund, and that ended up happening. And then the other one, we got a contract, like we actually got quoted, rather. We got a quote, but we didn't buy it because it was just really expensive.
Oh, okay. So neither of those items actually ended up in a successful purchase or transaction?
No.
Okay. Okay. So you didn't really set up a relationship or process?
No relationship setup. If anything, there's just like something on the back burner that they can contact one of the companies that I talk to, and they're willing to do it. But that's it.
I do think
with the result.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that makes the bullet point a little trickier. I don't know if I would say that I sourced something from a supplier if we never really purchased it. But that just might be like me kind of misusing the term in my head, because I think it's technically correct. You did find a supplier even if you didn't purchase anything.
They found a supplier, but not a suitable supplier.
Yeah, it's kind of conditional, isn't it? Like if they end up getting, like, paying the money for it, and they end up making it successfully, then hey, that's fantastic. But it's sort of nothing really came to fruition by the time I had to leave.
I do still think that you can easily discuss that as a very positive experience. Again, being able to reach out to vendors and communicate with them, I think, is a valuable skill. And I think there's nothing wrong with saying, yeah, it didn't work out. They didn't purchase it, or at least while I was there, nothing really came of it. But you wouldn't phrase it like that, of course. You would just say, I did my part where I communicated with them. And even though we didn't purchase the product for this reason, what you already told us, it shows that you're able, to source a unique or short supply component.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
Okay.
a great way to say it in an interview, but I don't know how that would translate well to a resume. What do you think, Chase?
Yeah, in my head, this is definitely like a great thing to bring out in an interview when they ask the kind of question where it's like, tell me about a time when things didn't go according to plan. This would be a pretty good response to that. On a resume, I'm a little wishy-washy on it. If you need the space for anything else, I think it could go. If you have white space, I think you could keep it. That's how I feel.
Yeah. I just worry about there being like very tangible results. I'm trying to draw out these results. And I think if we don't put sort of a result here or frame it in
I guess to be more specific, because I don't think I stated this correctly before, we got refunded for a previous synthesis that they did for us that was impure, like it was just contaminated, and they redid it again, and they would send us the chemical for free, and they paid for the characterization. So it was kind of like I ended up, but it was sort of a trivial amount of money. So I think I got back like $1,000. That's how much they charged us. That makes sense.
You did,
if you want a
did
quantification,
not.
I could say $1,000, but it's just kind of like,
I'm not sure I fully understand. So in the end, you did get some of the chemical that you were looking for?
No.
No? Okay.
I came into the company where they had already tried to purchase this material from this chemical supplier. And then I negotiated with them for a reattempt of the synthesis and a characterization and a refund for the failed synthesis, and then a free product if they succeeded in their synthesis in the second go around.
I gotcha.
So, and from that sense, that was actually pretty nice of them to do that. But again, it was only they only charged $1,000.
Sure. So it wasn't.
See, the thing is, it's such an uncommon compound that the quotes are kind of funny, because we got quoted for $1,000 from them for like a ton of it, and then the other company we contacted wanted to charge us like $20,000 for almost nothing. So, like, people just don't even know what to charge for it. But anyway, I think I'll if I keep it, then I'll just phrase it as like something relating to vendor communication, but not mention it as a project.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the first half of this bullet. A lot of my job is actually talking to suppliers, and so being able to identify suppliers and communicate with suppliers and communicate your requirements successfully to the suppliers, that's really big, because that's half of what I do.
All right, let's move on to your next internship position. All right, conducted data analysis on thermal expansion of urea, which included several models. Usually we say if you have the word several or many, I like to just throw in the number of models or the number of X, Y. So I'd say number, unless it's like 2. And that's not very several. That would be a few. For thermal expansion and subsequent comparison of the models using this criterion. Okay.
Yeah, it's a very esoteric sort of thing. I wasn't sure. This one was the hardest one for me to create. It's also got the least amount of bullet points. This was much more of like an academic experience in that it was a lot of learning very niche sort of things, and it's a statistics sort of project for the most part.
Okay, so you didn't collect the data, you just analyzed the data?
It was sort of a metadata analysis. We just took the data from a bunch of different existing papers and did an analysis on them.
Okay.
It's the method that we use is like it's not conventionally used in that field, and that's sort of what the paper that we wrote is also talking about, the utility of using this method in crystallography. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you don't say the word crystallography. You say molecular crystal.
Yeah. The field is like it's sort of a weird gray area, but I would say it falls in crystallography. And that's like the group is a crystallography group.
Okay, so you created the models that you created for I guess those models are what you use to analyze the data.
Yeah, the Akaike information criterion, it compares a set of models, and then it gives you the relative amount of information that's lost when each one is selected. So you can have an idea of when you have a limited amount of information on what the actual true model is, it gives you an indication of which one will be the best one, basically.
So if you started the bullet point with created models for thermal expansion and compared them using this criterion, would you be losing anything by not saying specifically data analysis? I don't know how much that's adding.
I don't think it'd be losing anything as much as it would be like, I think it would be like a less accurate way of saying it. It might sound better though, because like, I guess the creation of the models isn't really the sort of hardest part, I guess.
Okay.
But
it's
I mean,
the comparing of the
either one would be fun. Yeah.
Okay.
And then
so
talking about it,
Okay.
know, the discussion part of it, I guess.
Well, that was the second bullet point, right? I'm guessing is like, okay. So I would actually just take out that bit because I don't think it's actually helping you at all. And I'd start with created.
Okay.
And then you'd say and compared or analyzed if you wanted to use the word analyze.
Okay.
The models using this criterion. I do want to.
Does it make more sense to state it generally and not include a Akaike information criterion? Like, is that too? I almost guarantee nothing I'm applying to is gonna like care about me knowing that particular criterion versus some other one. You know what I mean?
Yes and no. I think you're correct in assuming that no one will know what this means. But I think if you say you compared them, period, or compared them using a criterion, period, I think actually stating what you use at least is a little more specific rather than being so general that you're like, what was he actually doing? Like, but that might
analyze some data.
So that it's all about like how specific should I be, you know? I kind of want to know, I guess you make this into your second bullet point, but I want to know like, yeah, you did this modeling and you compared them, but like, why do I care? Like, what was the result? Were you trying to do something with this data? Like what were you like, what was the big picture like goal for the project?
I think it was to show the efficacy of using this particular method of analysis in crystallography. It's like a sub project of a larger thing that the group is doing that relates to like image processing and symmetry detection. And this is related in a similar way. But
How does it sound? Can you see this? Can you see this?
yeah, I can see it.
So I suggest to validate usage of the analysis like method or whatever in crystallography. Because right now I don't know why you're doing this. It just says you're doing it. Ideally you'd have a result, but I think your result is your second bullet point is kind of like publishing a paper or, telling people about what we've done. And I think that it's a little bit of a long bullet point by itself. So I think it kind of does make sense to me for you to split the two up. But I think adding that little bit at the end will kind of give a little more context.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, cool. All right. Co-wrote manuscript describing methods and results of the analysis.
Real quick.
Which could be put into, I don't know what that means.
It's like a
get into that point. I'd like to kind of read off a comment from Frost.
Oh, yeah, Frost, yeah.
Yeah, they say, I assume that this is I assume that's the one in your publication section, the report that you wrote here. It would be a good idea to say what type of meta-analysis you performed. Like if you did heterogeneity/sensitivity analysis, because industry people don't really go deep into reading your publication, unlike in academia. Something like conducted meta-analysis about X using sensitivity analysis to conclude Y. And that's from Frost.
Yeah, this is like Frost's like jam, I think. When we were looking at his resume, it was a lot of looking at data that already existed and processing it and kind of drawing conclusions from that.
The publication in the publication section is actually for the third experience.
Oh, okay.
I didn't include it for the second one just because it's not actually up yet. So I wanted to just like if I put the other publication in, it would be like expected submission to whatever thing, The other one is actually like a ready publication. It has been published. It's out there.
Okay. I would say that's something that you can add if you have extra space at the end of the day once we're done looking at this. Like, I'm sure you're going to be like shuffling words around, taking stuff out and stuff like that. So, I would say that that's like kind of another possibility of adding, more. If you had extra space once we're done, then yeah, throw it down there. It's okay if it hasn't been published yet. I've seen lots of citations that haven't been published yet, but I think that's just because it takes a really long time to publish things. And I think people understand that.
I'm getting the vibe from this is basically reword the first bullet point to actually be a little bit more maybe explanatory or and then I could almost remove the second bullet point if I'm going to put it in the publication section.
You could if you wanted to, but I think you need to mention like connect the two somehow.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like we did this and then we wrote a paper on it. Something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
All right. Any more thoughts on this one? I have no idea what ARXIV is. And
archive is like a lot of scientists put their work on it because there's less. It doesn't have to go through publication process first. So basically, everyone throws it on the archive when they submit it, and then they change little things here and there to meet the criteria of a particular like journal, and then most things on the archive end up becoming published work. Basically, it's just a faster way for people in their fields to get access to really recent research.
Okay, so if I were you and you were adding this publication down into your publications, I wouldn't acknowledge archive at all. I would just say expected to be published, in whatever journal or whatever. I think archive is probably more academia related, and I don't think anybody will really know what it means anyway. But yeah, that's kind of what my thought is. All right,
Okay.
do we want to go to undergraduate researcher?
To kind of circle back real quick on the unpublished paper, Frost adds that you could put it in and label it as, for example, they use in their resume, my name, date, manuscript title, manuscript in preparation, just kind of appended at the end there. And again, he's typing this out in the chat so you can see the formatting there. If it's not yet submitted to ARXIV, it would be a great idea to create a framework and upload it to OSF so we'll already have a DOI.
I don't know what those mean, but I'm assuming you do.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to write C Frost's comment.
Yeah. I recorded. I took a snippet.
Okay, cool. And this is going to be sent to you afterwards, so you don't need to take a snippet of this, even though my handwriting is pretty horrendous. I apologize. All right, let's do this last item. All right, conducted research on low temperature graphene synthesis, which included experimental design, sample processing, sample characterization, data analysis, and presenting results, leading to publication. And so this is the publication, yes, in the section.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so you start off kind of as a general overview of the project, and then you get a little bit more into detail with the following bullet points. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I basically talked about I wanted someone to read it and see that I can. I know basic I can use surface characterizing microscopes. I understand the fundamentals of spectroscopy as it relates to thin film analysis, and that I can use different chemicals. I've worked with pretty harsh chemicals.
Okay.
And then obviously the vacuum experience as well.
Right.
Oh, so I guess chemical vapor deposition is a very valuable part of that whole thing as well. Particularly for semiconductor industry stuff.
In that, you're saying that's in the fourth
this
bullet point?
Yeah. Yes. I think this bullet point is probably the most relevant to the jobs I'll be applying for, because this was a lab. My research was funded by Intel.
Okay, so why don't you list this first? If you were attempting to go for relevancy, if you think this is your strongest.
I figured the industry experience would be just favored, period, over.
Okay, because you have the engineering titled.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, that's is a very benign thing, but I had an option for picking my title, because they posted two different job postings and had me pick. I picked the one with engineering, but I could also call it experimental physicist intern, which sounds pretty cool too.
But you want to be an engineer, so maybe you should stick with engineering.
Fair.
Maybe I'm biased. All right.
No, it's better.
Okay, so I think the first one is fine as a general overview of what you've done, but I do think you need to add a little bit more to your other ones, your lower bullet points. So when I read this and analyze samples using this microscope and spectroscopy, Like,
Um,
what were you trying to look for? What were you analyzing the samples to do? I'm assuming you were looking at graphene synthesis, but were you like trying to see, the success rate of synthesis in,
right,
cryogenic,
right.
conditions? But kind of adding a little more context rather than just saying, I did this, period, would help, I think, a lot.
Right.
So I'm gonna write that in.
That makes sense.
Add context. And then ideally result as well. But I think you could probably go into the result later. Right? Do you go into the result?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's
How do you mean?
all right, processed samples. Process the samples in involving or using, I guess, using spin coating and curing films, etching of materials, and meticulous execution of several steps. That is the most general statement in your entire resume.
Yeah. So this is my. I totally. Yeah. No. I agree that should be changed. But my thought process for putting it in was basically that there are just many steps, and I feel like just general. There's a lot of scientific. What is the way to phrase it?
Jargon.
There's a lot of things where there's just like a very specific set of very convoluted steps that have to be followed precisely.
Okay.
And I think that's like a useful thing to be able to do and not mess up. Like for the graphene thing, it was like getting the graphene onto a substrate that it could be characterized from. It was very easy to mess up, and it would just completely ruin your sample. So I got good at doing things that are really tedious and difficult and not messing them up.
Okay. So this is difficult for me because I'm not very familiar with the semiconductor industry. I'm hoping you are a little bit, so you can help me. So usually in mechanical engineering, there are technicians that actually do the machining and assembly and stuff like that. And we, the engineers, usually just design the parts and write the test and like oversee the testing and stuff like that. Will you if you worked in the semiconductor industry, how much actual hands-on work will you be doing? Or is it, a majority of like design work where you actually won't be, handling stuff?
I think it just depends on the position.
Okay.
And like the size of the company. So like if I were to get an engineering position at Intel, I would think it would be more in the, like how you said, the traditional, it would not be technician position.
Okay.
And therefore that information would be irrelevant. But if it kind of depends on the size of the lab too. Like if I'm doing lab research,
right,
the volume at which the research is done is so much smaller that they probably would have people do what one might call technician work. Does that make sense? So I guess that was a convoluted way of saying I don't know.
Yeah, no, I honestly suggest you make 2 resumes. One for something like Intel, where you'd be mostly doing design work or stuff like that. And then one for, the smaller lab work or, because right now, I don't see you have any design work at all. And that's okay. You have a lot of lab experience though. So I think your lab, applying to a lab position would be a lot, not easier, but I think you have a stronger lab resume than you do have a design resume.
Yeah, 100%. That was another thing I independently am trying to do. I'm building a 3D printer and I want to kind of get decent at using CAD. But
Yeah.
I did very little design work. In my
Yeah,
internship, I designed like one thing, and it was not a complicated thing at all.
Okay. If you do decide to split, make a separate resume, for design work and not design work, even if it's minor, I would include it. It's not here, obviously. But minor design work is better, in my opinion, than no design work. To see that you've, at least thought about it in that certain way. You have a very strong academic, research-based resume, but I don't know how successful you will be with design positions right now. And I understand that that's what you're trying to do with the 3D printer, and that's awesome. I am 100% for personal projects as a way to further your, education by yourself. If you didn't receive that what you wanted in college or whatever. But I think it will be difficult with this resume right now to get a design work. Period. So I'm sorry I'm saying this right at the end, but
that's fine.
I think
that kind of makes intuitive sense to me.
Yeah,
I don't think I wrote. The only word I put designed in is for experimentation. I've done a lot of parameter optimization stuff, but not actually designing like parts or anything.
You might actually want to target test engineering and test designing, because I think you kind of have a better slant on this stuff of like testing things than designing a part, like designing a test versus designing a part. You know what I mean? Because I think research is closer to testing, in my mind, at least. I don't know if you guys want to chime in and totally disagree with me, but that's kind of what I kind of perceive it as. Just an option.
No, I agree.
Just an option. All right. Have we lost Chase and oh gosh, I forgot the name. Jasmine?
Yeah, thanks for going so long over.
No worries, man.
I'm still here. I just didn't have a whole lot to contribute. This is all not an area that I'm familiar with.
Yeah,
No
right
worries.
now I'm more so a mouthpiece for Frost, who, by the way, says, yeah, it depends on the company and the position you're applying to. For example, Marvel, not the comic book company, would be more into design, and Ambique Micro would be more into development.
Man, he needs to get on voice chat because he has the most to contribute out of everybody right now. You should.
Yeah,
you guys
thanks,
should
Frost.
you guys should I don't know, exchange numbers or something. All right. We're almost done. Let's power through this. Extensive experience. All right. I want you to do verb there. And I think this is very similar to when you list the scientific instruments and tools used in your first position. I think if you maybe pick out a couple of those specialized stuff and say how you controlled them with LabVIEW and what the results were, you can throw the rest either into a hardware technical skill section. But I don't think just listing them out is going to help, especially if those items aren't used in this semiconductor industry that you're interested in.
Right. I guess this might be the wrong way to have been thinking about it when I wrote this. Okay. I guess I was imagining that the person reading it would kind of know, at least for the first and third experiences, most of the things that I talk about, so that when they read it, they actually get a really good sense of what I did, because they're like, oh, okay, he used that.
Don't worry. I mean that makes sense because you understand what you've done, so it's hard to put yourself into somebody else's shoes that hasn't done the things that you've done. I'm obviously in I'm not in the research world at all. I'm in kind of the design world, so it's easier for me to look at it in a design sort of frame of mind. And then like, and so that's why I'm like, I don't know what this means. I don't know what that means. But I think hopefully that can help you. This will just make your resume stronger, in my opinion. Especially if you're targeting specific industry. So for this last bullet point, I kind of just suggest you do the same thing as with the scientific instruments bullet. I'll just kind of make that note there. And we talked about education already. Do we want to talk about your summer school stuff a little bit more in more detail, or are you fine with it?
The thing is, it's sort of like there's not that much to expound on with it, you know. Like even if I was asked like specific information in an interview, like I would only be able to say like the very basic, and I would literally tell them like, oh, I got a basic exposure, so that I kind of know what these things are, and I could like I couldn't answer any technical question about any of these things. I don't know about lattice field theory sufficiently well. I just kind of have a general understanding.
And that's why you don't list them in the software section, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's also well, I guess for relevant experience, I didn't put it. I had it in there originally, and then the person in the Discord said that they think I should put it in education. And I was like, fair enough. It's a summer school, and it's not really like something that if an interviewer was like, tell me all about that I would be wouldn't have concrete stuff like the other ones, I guess.
Yeah, in my opinion, I would kind of want to see more format like the bullet points, kind of like what you did with these simulations and what you did with these languages, and then like how you used them and stuff like that. But if you literally just touch them or attended a lecture about them, that's a little bit more difficult because you don't have a way to prove that you've, used the software, used the language or whatever. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Are we alone? Is there anybody else here?
I'm here still.
What do you think?
About writing about assuming the audience.
More like if Grayson has just kind of touched these things like briefly and doesn't have a whole lot of like experience with them, if it's okay to still include them, or if he should focus on other things, or what?
If you have enough experience to talk to them and talk about them and talk to your experience, because it's really about getting into the interview and then being able to sell yourself at the interview. So if having that on there gets you into the interview, and then you can talk about what you did with them, what you can do, and other points, and just talk about your experience, I would say yes. If you just know what one looks like, maybe not, but if you kind of know how it works, then definitely put it on there, because that's what's going to get you to the interview part, and that's really where all the good stuff happens.
Yeah, I think I was thinking in a similar line when I put it on. It kind of just has. I think it makes me look more technical.
I want to agree. Point. I want to agree with Jade, and I also want to kind of emphasize that if you get that interview, it's okay to say, yes, these are things that I've done, but frankly, I would want to review the material or kind of retrain myself on the equipment to be familiar with it again. It's okay to kind of admit that you.
It was 1 month 2 years ago, right? I mean.
Yeah. I mean, you can just kind of say that sort of thing where, hey, I've done it. I can do it again. I'm sorry if you have a technical question for me right now, I might not be able to answer it. Something like that is perfectly fine.
Okay. Yeah.
And Frost says, I would change the school into program because it is a summer program. Just a tiny nuance.
Good eye, Frost. Man, Frost is, carrying me.
Personally?
I see. Yes, it
Personally,
had a comically long name that was so long that I didn't put it on. It was called Cyber Infrastructure for Modeling Physical Systems. Oh, Advanced Cyber Infrastructure.
Oh my
I was
gosh.
like, that's just so jargony. Computational physics, good enough.
All right. Publication, I think, is fine. Frost mentioned the including the manuscript in preparation for stuff that you haven't published yet. I think your technical.
I'll be putting stuff from the bullet points into that.
Yeah, and try not to say things twice if you can. Your software, I would sort by relevancy or like order.
Okay.
So if you learn CAD, eventually throw CAD up there. If you like, basically whatever you think is most relevant for the industry, list that first, and then follow it up with the other stuff. I know some people listed by this alphabetical order, listed by like the stuff they know the best to the stuff they know the least. But I suggest by relevancy to the position that you're applying to.
Is Excel a skill?
It's as much skill as Python is.
I think Excel is one of those things where it's almost expected to be on there. And if you know the basics, then you might not be hurt to not include it unless a job posting specifically asks for experience with Excel or Microsoft Office, then sure. But that being said, if you have more in-depth experience, as you might, since you did a lot of research and data handling, I think it's worth including in there, and maybe being more specific and saying if you worked with VBA, definitely. I wouldn't list like pivot tables or anything like that, but if Excel comes up in an interview, those are good things to talk about because I feel like interviews have griped to me or in my presence that people will list Excel and they don't even know how to do a pivot table, which they consider to be very basic. And it's a very simple thing to do. Yes, it's just not a lot of people seem to actually know it.
Yes, 100% agree.
Okay.
Although a lot of job openings now, just the position like requirements or whatever, I see Microsoft Office on every single freaking one of them, and it drives me up the wall. But
I mean, this might be because of my physics background or something, but yeah, I don't know. If you said what's a pivot table, I don't know. I might have used it, but I just don't know that it's called a pivot table. I don't know. But
yeah, like I said, you're not alone in that. Lots of people, quote unquote, know how to use Excel, but don't know how to use a pivot table. I would look into it. It's pretty handy, and it's really not hard to get the hang of. It's just a button you click on, and it's basically a pre-made table for you that has handy sorting features. But just kind of be aware that people might push back on that a little bit if you're going to list it on your resume.
Yeah, I think the best rule of thumb is that if it's on your resume, it's fair game for questions. And you can say, hey, I don't know, but, don't be surprised, kind of.
For sure. You bring it on yourself by putting it on there.
Yep. If it's on the resume, it's fair game. But okay, so overall, how does everybody feel? Do we feel like we've made progress here? Do you feel better? Do you feel worse? How do you feel?
I have one more overall feedback.
Never mind.
Sorry. I didn't really realize this until halfway through the resume, and I didn't want to stop while we were in the middle of the experience. But I would not put bullet points at the end, periods at the end of your bullet points. especially when they're not full sentences.
It's minor.
It's
I don't
minor.
I don't think people will care.
Yeah, maybe I'm just being nitpicky.
Especially since Grayson uses a lot of multi-sentence bullet points. I think that's probably why they're like, oh, I have to put, bullet points within this bullet or periods within this bullet point. So I should put them at the end.
I do think that's fine.
You read my mind. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. And then I was like, well, now I can't have half of them not have periods at the end and then half of them have periods at the end.
You need to learn how to use the semicolon. The semicolon is beautiful.
Yeah.
But overall, I think that I hope I was successful in communicating from a design perspective, looking at your resume, how a design person would read it. What are your thoughts? Do you think that this was helpful? I hope it was helpful. But
oh yeah, no, thank you so much. That was very thorough. I'm glad there was a lot of good information there. Definitely, there's like a few ones that I'm gonna do immediately. So getting rid of the third point on the first experience and listing them as the skills, and then removing all of the conceptual skills from that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to basically completely retool the second experience. And then sort of see if I can fit the publication into the publication section, and then I can remove a line from. So I'll work on the education section in the way that Jade had mentioned. I want to try to keep the relevant coursework there, but we'll see. And then I may or may not remove the RPI experience as a whole, and then I'll put the associate's degree in its place as well. And then, of course, as we mentioned with the undergraduate experience, again, rewording things, tying it to actual specific experiences. Yeah.
I think
there's more than that. I took some notes and stuff.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, it's going to only make your resume stronger and a little more focused.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we've been at this for a minute and a half. So I think that if anybody else has any more comments, I think we should probably stop recording. Who's recording this? Is Rowan recording this? I think if he is, then I think we're about good. If anybody has any other comments, now's the time.
You guys want, you can put it on the channel later if you remember something. Feel free. But thank you all so much for taking all the time to do that.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
I did not expect this to go so long. That's good for me.
For being a brave volunteer. We don't have many brave volunteers, so we have to appreciate the ones we get.
All right, physics majors, we need every advantage we can get, against the engineers.
We're honestly, I'm rooting for you.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll let you guys know. I've been applying to places, but I'll unfortunately, I just sent my resume to someone who's referring me for Intel positions, but internally. So
maybe they'll be like,
changes and maybe reapply.
Maybe they'll be like, I've never seen a physics major before. This is interesting, and they'll take a chance on you.
I won't get my hopes up, but.
Oh, and if you want your resume done, let us know, because you could be the next.